The grill was unusually quiet for a Thursday evening, the kind of quiet that felt intentional, like the town was holding its breath, waiting for the next catastrophe. Caroline sat in a corner booth with Elena, Stefan, Damon and Bonnie, picking at a plate of fries she had no real appetite for, listening to Damon complain about the bourbon selection with the kind of practiced annoyance that meant he was bored rather than actually upset. It felt normal, almost mundane, and Caroline was just starting to relax into the illusion of peace when Matt burst through the door, his expression tight with the kind of tension that made her stomach drop. He scanned the room, found their table, and crossed to them with quick, purposeful steps that told Caroline whatever he was about to say would ruin the rest of her night. "We have a problem," Matt said without preamble, and the casual conversation at the table died instantly. Damon set down his glass, Stefan straightened in his seat, and Elena's hand found Caroline's under the table, a gesture of solidarity that Caroline both appreciated and resented, because it meant Elena sensed the same dread she felt. Stefan spoke first, his voice calm but edged with wariness. "What kind of problem?" Matt pulled out a chair and sat, leaning forward so his voice wouldn't carry to the few other patrons scattered around the grill. "I saw Klaus about an hour ago, near the woods on the edge of town. He was standing over something. I couldn't see what, but the way he was looking around, like he didn't want to be seen, it was suspicious as hell." The name landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of tension through the group. Caroline felt her chest tighten, felt the familiar complicated knot of emotions that always accompanied any mention of Klaus Mikkelsen. Damon's expression darkened. Klaus is supposed to be in New Orleans, playing king of the French Quarter. "What the hell is he doing back here?" Bonnie's brow furrowed. "Did he see you?" Matt shook his head. "I don't think so. I was in my truck, and I got out of there as soon as I realised who it was." Elena's grip on Caroline's hand tightened. "This can't be a coincidence. People have been disappearing. Bodies turning up drained. We thought it was just a rogue vampire passing through, but if Klaus is here..." Before we start, subscribe if you enjoy these Vampire Diaries stories, and after listening, tell me in the comments, do you think Caroline made the right choice about Klaus in the end, or should she have chosen differently? The implications hung heavy in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone at the table. Klaus was a lot of things: a monster, a killer, an original vampire with 1,000 years of blood on his hands. And if he was lurking around Mystic Falls acting suspicious while people died, the logical conclusion was that he was responsible. Caroline felt sick. She'd seen Klaus's capacity for violence, had witnessed firsthand the casual cruelty he was capable of when someone crossed him or threatened what he considered his. But she'd also seen other sides of him, moments of unexpected kindness, flashes of vulnerability that he hid behind arrogance and wit. The cognitive dissonance of it exhausted her. Stefan's voice cut through her thoughts. "We need to find out what he's doing here, why he's back, and whether he's connected to the disappearances." Damon leaned back in his chair, his expression calculating. "And how exactly do we do that? It's not like we can just walk up to Klaus and ask him politely if he's been murdering locals for fun." Tyler, who had been silent until now, spoke up from where he'd been nursing a beer at the bar and had clearly overheard everything. He walked over, his jaw tight. "We can't just ignore this. If Klaus is killing people again, we have to stop him." The certainty in Tyler's voice was born from personal history, from the pain Klaus had caused him, his mother, his entire life upended by the hybrid experiments and manipulations. Caroline understood his anger, shared some of it, but she also felt a whisper of doubt. Klaus had left Mystic Falls months ago, had claimed he was building something in New Orleans, creating a kingdom, finding his place. Why would he come back to their small town just to kill randomly? It didn't fit the pattern of his usual calculated cruelty. Bonnie tapped her fingers on the table, thinking, "We need information. We need to know what he's planning, whether he's alone, what his endgame is." Damon's gaze slid to Caroline, and she felt the weight of it before he even spoke. "We need someone to get close to him, someone he'd actually talk to." Caroline's blood went cold. "No, absolutely not." Damon's smile was sharp, humourless. "Come on, Blondie. We all know Klaus has a thing for you. He'd actually let you close enough to find out what he's up to." Caroline pushed her plate away, her appetite completely gone. "I am not going to be bait for Klaus Michelsen. Find another way." Elena's voice was gentle, apologetic. "Care, I know it's not fair, but Damon's right. Klaus, he cares about you. He'd lower his guard with you in a way he wouldn't with any of us." The truth of it made Caroline want to scream. She'd spent months trying to forget the way Klaus looked at her, the way his attention felt both flattering and terrifying, the way he'd drawn her and left her gifts and spoken to her like she was someone extraordinary. She'd tried to bury the part of her that responded to that attention, the part that felt seen in a way she rarely did with anyone else. And now her friends wanted her to weaponize that connection, to use Klaus's regard for her as a tool. Stefan's expression was conflicted, guilty. "We wouldn't ask if there was another option, Caroline, but if Klaus is behind these deaths, we need to know. And if he's not, we still need to know why he's here." Caroline looked around the table, at the faces of people she loved, people she'd fought beside and bled for, and she saw the desperation there, the fear. They were asking her to do this because they had no other choice, because Klaus was a threat they couldn't handle through normal means, because she was the only one who had leverage. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. "Fine," she said finally, and the word tasted bitter. "But if this goes sideways, if he does something, you all better be ready to back me up." Damon's smile widened. "That's our girl." Caroline wanted to hit him. Instead, she stood, grabbing her jacket from the back of her chair. "I'll go tomorrow. I need to prepare, figure out what I'm going to say, how I'm going to approach this." Bonnie reached out and squeezed her arm. "Thank you, Care. Be careful." Caroline nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left the grill before anyone could see the tears of frustration and fear threatening to spill over. Outside, the cool night air did nothing to ease the tightness in her chest. She leaned against her car, staring up at the stars, and tried to convince herself that spending a day with Klaus Michelsen, pretending she wanted his company, pretending she didn't feel the dangerous pull of his attention, would be easy. She failed. That night, Caroline barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios, planning what she'd say, how she'd act. She needed to be convincing, needed Klaus to believe she was there because she wanted to be, not because her friends had sent her on a spy mission. The problem was, a small, traitorous part of her wasn't entirely sure she'd be pretending. Klaus had always gotten under her skin in ways she didn't want to examine too closely, had made her feel things she had no business feeling for someone who had caused so much pain. By the time morning light filtered through her curtains, Caroline had resigned herself to the plan. She showered, dressed carefully in jeans and a soft blue sweater that she absolutely did not choose, because Klaus had once told her blue brought out her eyes, and steeled herself for what was to come. She texted the group that she was going, received a flurry of supportive and worried responses, and then drove to the one place in Mystic Falls where she knew Klaus would be if he was staying in town, the old Lockwood mansion. It had been abandoned since the pack had scattered, a sprawling estate on the edge of town that would appeal to Klaus's sense of grandeur and provide the privacy he'd need if he was up to something he wanted hidden. Caroline parked at the end of the long driveway, taking a moment to gather her courage before walking up to the front door. She raised her hand to knock, hesitated, then forced herself to follow through. The sound echoed through the house, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the door swung open, and Klaus stood there, dressed casually in dark jeans and a Henley, his expression shifting from surprise to pleased amusement in the space of a heartbeat. "Caroline," he said, and his voice carried that faint accent and warmth that always managed to disarm her. "To what do I owe the unexpected pleasure?" Caroline forced a smile, channeling every ounce of confidence she possessed. "I heard you were in town. Thought I'd stop by and see what brings the big bad hybrid back to Mystic Falls." Klaus's smile widened, and he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "How very bold of you, love." "Do come in." Caroline walked past him into the house, and as the door closed behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just walked into something far more complicated than a simple information-gathering mission. The Lockwood mansion was exactly as she remembered it, grand and slightly dated, but Klaus had clearly made himself at home. There were art supplies scattered on a table near the window, canvases leaning against the wall, and the faint scent of oil paint in the air. Klaus watched her take in the space, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't expecting company, or I'd have tidied up." Caroline turned to face him, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "Why are you here, Klaus? Last I heard, you were busy building your empire in New Orleans." Klaus moved further into the room, pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter on the sideboard. "Can't a man visit old haunts without an interrogation?" His tone was light, but there was something guarded in his eyes. Caroline crossed her arms. "Not when people are disappearing and turning up dead. Not when you're spotted lurking in the woods acting suspicious." Klaus's expression flickered, something dark passing across his features before settling back into casual amusement. "And naturally, you all assumed I was responsible." "How predictable." Caroline held his gaze. "Can you blame us? You're not exactly known for your restraint when it comes to violence." Klaus took a sip of his drink, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, more serious. "I'm not here to hurt anyone, Caroline. Quite the opposite, in fact." Before Caroline could ask what that meant, Klaus set down his glass and smiled, the charm sliding back into place like armour. "But if you're here, why waste the day with grim conversations? Let me show you what I've been working on." Klaus led Caroline deeper into the mansion, through hallways lined with dust-covered portraits and into what must have once been a formal sitting room, but had been transformed into something else entirely. Caroline stopped in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. The room was filled with art, canvases of varying sizes propped against walls, hanging on makeshift displays, scattered across every available surface. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that seemed to capture emotion more than form, all rendered in Klaus's distinctive style, bold and layered, and somehow achingly vulnerable, despite the subject matter. "You've been busy," Caroline said, and her voice came out softer than she intended. Klaus moved to stand beside one of the larger canvases, a painting of New Orleans at night, the French Quarter alive with colour and shadow. "Art has always been my refuge, a way to process the chaos of existence. When I'm here, in this room, I'm not the hybrid, not the monster. I'm just someone trying to capture beauty before it fades." The honesty in his words caught Caroline off guard, stripped away some of the defensive walls she'd built before coming here. She moved further into the room, studying the paintings, and found herself genuinely impressed by the skill and emotion in each piece. Klaus watched her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. "You appreciate art," he said, and it wasn't a question. Caroline nodded. "I appreciate beauty, and these are beautiful, Klaus." Something in his expression softened, and he moved to another canvas, this one covered with a cloth. I don't usually show works in progress, but since you're here, he pulled the cloth away, revealing a painting that made Caroline's heart stutter. It was a girl, young and radiant, caught in a moment of pure joy, her head thrown back in laughter, blonde curls cascading around her face. It took Caroline a moment to realise she was looking at herself, or rather a version of herself as seen through Klaus's eyes, vibrant and alive and impossibly lovely. "Klaus," she breathed, and didn't know what else to say. Klaus's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I started this months ago, in New Orleans. I couldn't seem to get it right, couldn't capture the light the way I remembered it. So I thought perhaps being here, in Mystic Falls, might help." Caroline tore her gaze away from the painting to look at him, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly undid her. This wasn't the arrogant original, the calculating predator. This was someone who created beauty to cope with darkness, who saw her as something worth immortalising in art. She needed to remember why she was here, needed to focus on the mission, on getting information, but standing in this room, surrounded by Klaus's art, seeing herself through his eyes, Caroline felt the careful distance she'd maintained beginning to crack. "Why do you paint me?" she asked, and the question came out more raw than she intended. Klaus moved closer, and Caroline's pulse quickened. "Because you're everything I'm not, love. Light, hope, genuine kindness. You look at the world and see potential, possibility. I look at the world and see threats and opportunities and ways to survive. Painting you reminds me that there's more to existence than mere survival." The confession settled between them, heavy with implication, and Caroline didn't know how to respond. Before she could try, Klaus's expression shifted, the vulnerability sliding away as he gestured toward the door. "But enough melancholy. You came to spend time with me, so let's make it worthwhile." "Have you eaten?" Caroline shook her head, relieved for the subject change and the chance to regain her equilibrium. "Not really," Klaus smiled. "Then allow me to play host. I may be a monster, but I'm a monster with excellent taste in cuisine." They moved to the mansion's kitchen, which Klaus had apparently stocked with an impressive array of food despite only being in town a short time. He cooked with the same focused intensity he brought to everything, and Caroline found herself relaxing despite her intentions, drawn into easy conversation about art, music, the differences between Mystic Falls and New Orleans. Klaus was charming when he wanted to be, witty and attentive, and Caroline caught herself laughing at his stories, genuinely enjoying his company. It was dangerous, she knew, this softening toward him. But in the warm light of the kitchen, with Klaus handing her a plate of perfectly prepared pasta, and smiling at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, it was hard to remember all the reasons she was supposed to keep her guard up. Meanwhile, across town, the rest of the group was conducting their own investigation. Stefan and Damon had gone to the site where Matt saw Klaus, searching for evidence for clues about what he'd been doing. They found traces of blood, vampire blood, and signs of a struggle. Bonnie performed a locator spell and discovered residual dark magic in the area, the kind associated with very old, very powerful vampires. Elena and Tyler went to talk to the families of the missing people, trying to find a connection, a pattern. What they discovered was troubling. All of the victims had been young, healthy, and had some connection to the founding families. It felt deliberate, targeted, like someone was making a statement. Back at the Salvatore boarding house, they reconvened, spreading out the information they'd gathered. Damon paced, his expression dark. "So we have blood at the scene, dark magic, and victims connected to founding families. This has Klaus written all over it." Stefan frowned, studying the notes they'd compiled. But why? He already proved his dominance over this town. What does he gain from killing these people now? Bonnie shook her head. Maybe it's not about gain. Maybe it's about revenge, or sending a message, or just because he can. Tyler's jaw clenched. We need to know what Caroline's found out. If Klaus admitted anything, if she got information we can use. Elena pulled out her phone, texting Caroline, but received no response. She's probably still with him. We need to give her time. Back at the Lockwood mansion, Caroline had lost track of time. After lunch, Klaus had shown her more of the house, pointing out architectural details and telling stories about the Lockwood family, with the kind of historical perspective only someone who'd lived for 1,000 years could provide. They ended up in the library, a room lined with old books and comfortable chairs, and Klaus poured wine while Caroline browsed the shelves. It felt surreal, domestic almost, and Caroline had to keep reminding herself that this was Klaus Mikkelsen, that she was here for a reason, that she needed to steer the conversation toward the disappearances. But every time she tried, Klaus deflected with charm and wit, changing the subject so smoothly that she barely noticed until the moment had passed. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Caroline excused herself. "Bathroom?" she asked, and Klaus gestured toward a hallway. "Second door on the right." Caroline walked down the hall, but instead of going to the bathroom, she found herself drawn to a closed door at the end of the corridor. She glanced back, making sure Klaus wasn't following, then carefully turned the handle. The door opened into what looked like a study, smaller than the library, but more personal, with a desk covered in papers, and against the far wall, a large wooden chest. Caroline's instincts prickled. This was the kind of place someone kept secrets. She moved quickly, crossing to the chest and carefully lifting the lid. What she found inside stole the breath from her lungs. The chest was filled with papers, letters, sketches, small wrapped packages, all organised with meticulous care. Caroline's hands shook as she picked up the first letter, her name written on the envelope in Klaus's distinctive handwriting. She opened it, her eyes scanning the contents, and felt tears prick at her eyes. It was dated the day of her high school graduation, a letter congratulating her, telling her how proud he was of the woman she'd become, how her strength and compassion inspired him. He'd been there, Caroline realised. He'd watched her graduate and written this letter and never sent it. She picked up another, this one dated a year later, her first birthday as a vampire. Another for the Miss Mystic Falls pageant, another for the day her mother was diagnosed with cancer, and this one, when Caroline read it, broke something open inside her. The letter was raw, vulnerable, full of Klaus admitting he'd stood outside the hospital that day, wanting to go to her, to offer comfort, but knowing she wouldn't want it from him. He wrote about how unfair it was that someone as good as Liz Forbes would suffer, while monsters like him lived forever. About how he wished he could take Caroline's pain, carry it for her. The letter ended with a simple line that made Caroline's vision blur with tears. "You deserve every happiness, Caroline Forbes, and I am sorry that I can only love you from a distance." She set the letter down with trembling hands and picked up a sketch pad from the chest, flipping through pages and pages of drawings. Her face, from every angle, in every mood. Caroline laughing, Caroline crying, Caroline lost in thought. It was obsessive and beautiful and deeply, devastatingly intimate. Beneath the sketchpad were wrapped packages, gifts he'd apparently bought but never given, each tagged with a date and occasion. A bracelet for her birthday, a rare book on architecture for Christmas, a silk scarf in her favourite shade of blue for no reason at all, except that he'd seen it and thought of her. Caroline sat back on her heels, overwhelmed by the weight of what she'd discovered. This wasn't a crush or a passing fancy. This was years of devotion, of paying attention, of loving someone from afar, and never asking for anything in return. She didn't hear Klaus enter the room, didn't realise he was there until he spoke, his voice quiet and achingly sad. I suppose there's no point in pretending you weren't meant to find that. Caroline's head snapped up, and she found Klaus standing in the doorway, his expression unguarded, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. She should have felt guilty for snooping, should have made an excuse or tried to explain. But all she could do was hold up one of the letters and ask, voice-breaking, "Why didn't you give these to me?" Klaus moved into the room slowly, like approaching a skittish animal. "Because you didn't want them. Because every gift I ever gave you, you rejected. Because I knew that my regard made you uncomfortable, made you feel obligated. I didn't want that. I just wanted," he trailed off, and Caroline saw him struggle to find the words. "I just wanted to love you in the only way you'd allow me to, silently, from a distance, asking nothing in return." The honesty of it shattered something inside Caroline, broke through all her carefully constructed defences. "Klaus," she whispered, but she didn't know what else to say. Klaus knelt down beside her, his gaze holding hers. "I know what you think of me, Caroline. I know I'm a monster, that I've done terrible things, that I don't deserve your regard or your time. But loving you, even silently, has made me want to be better. You don't have to do anything with that information. I don't expect anything from you. I just thought you should know." Caroline felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. There's a whole gallery in the other room. Paintings of me. Klaus's smile was sad. Dozens of them. Across years. I paint you when I'm lost, when I need to remember that beauty exists in the world. You've been my anchor, Caroline, whether you knew it or not. The weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, the evidence of years of silent devotion spread out around her in letters and art and gifts never given. It was too much. Caroline felt something shift inside her, felt the resistance she'd maintained crumbling under the sheer force of being truly seen, truly valued, by someone who asked nothing in return. Caroline sat surrounded by the evidence of Klaus's devotion, letters and sketches and carefully wrapped gifts that represented years of attention she'd never known she had, and felt the careful walls she'd built around her feelings begin to crack. Klaus remained kneeling beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, but maintaining just enough distance to give her space to process. His expression was open, vulnerable, lacking all the usual arrogance and swagger, and it was that vulnerability more than anything that undid her. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been doing this?" Klaus glanced at the chest, at the carefully organised contents. "Since the day I first drew you, when you were still human. Before you knew what I was, I saw something in you then that I hadn't seen in centuries. A light that didn't dim, even when faced with darkness. And after you were turned, after you survived and became this extraordinary creature, I couldn't look away." He picked up one of the sketches, a simple drawing of Caroline smiling. "I started writing letters because I couldn't say the things I wanted to say to your face. I bought gifts because seeing something that reminded me of you brought me joy, even if I never had the courage to give them to you. And I painted because capturing your light on canvas was the closest I could come to holding on to something good in my very long, very dark life." Caroline's throat tightened, and she carefully set down the letter she'd been holding, the one about her mother, the one that had broken her heart. "You were there, at the hospital, when my mum was diagnosed. It wasn't a question." Klaus nodded. "I stood in the parking lot for 3 hours, wanting to go inside, wanting to offer comfort or support, or just my presence, but I knew you wouldn't want me there. Knew my presence would only make things harder. So I left, and I went home and I wrote that letter instead, pouring everything I couldn't say into words you'd never read. The image of Klaus standing alone in a hospital parking lot, caring for someone but restraining himself because he knew he wasn't wanted, struck Caroline as one of the saddest things she'd ever heard. It didn't erase the terrible things he'd done, didn't make him less of a monster in many ways, but it complicated the narrative she'd constructed about him, added layers of humanity to someone she'd tried to see as simply evil. "Why show me this now?" Caroline asked. "Why keep all of this here where I could find it?" Klaus's smile was bittersweet. "Because I'm tired, Caroline. Tired of hiding how I feel. Tired of loving you in silence. Tired of pretending I don't care when every moment away from you feels like slow death. When I saw you at my door this morning, I knew your friends had sent you. Knew you were here to spy on me, to figure out what I'm doing in town. And I didn't care. I just wanted to spend time with you, whatever the reason. But I've been alive for 1,000 years, and I'm done being a coward about the one thing that actually matters." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and Caroline felt something inside her shift, realigning like tectonic plates finding new positions. She looked at Klaus, really looked at him, saw past the monster to the man underneath, the one who painted beauty and wrote love letters he never sent, and stood in parking lots caring for people from a distance. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted, gesturing at the chest, at the letters and gifts and evidence of devotion. "I don't know how to reconcile the Klaus who does this with the Klaus who hurts people, who kills without remorse, who's caused so much pain to people I love." Klaus's expression was understanding, sad, but not surprised. "You don't have to reconcile it, love. I am both of those people, the monster and the man who loves you. I won't ask you to ignore my sins or pretend I'm something I'm not. I just wanted you to know that you've changed me, made me want to be better, even if I fail more often than I succeed." Caroline felt tears streak down her face, and before she could overthink it, before fear or logic could intervene, she reached out and took Klaus's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and for a long moment they just sat there, holding on to each other in a room full of unspoken words made tangible. Then Caroline's phone buzzed in her pocket, shattering the moment. She reluctantly pulled away, checking the screen to find multiple texts from Elena, Stefan and Bonnie, all asking variations of the same question. Had she learned anything? Did Klaus admit to the disappearances? Was she safe? Reality crashed back in, reminding Caroline why she was here, what she was supposed to be doing. Guilt twisted in her stomach, sharp and uncomfortable, because she'd gotten so caught up in Klaus's revelations that she'd forgotten about the people dying, about the investigation, about her actual purpose for coming here. Klaus watched her face, reading the conflict there with the ease of someone who'd spent centuries learning to interpret human expression. "Your friends are worried," he said quietly. "They think I'm responsible for the disappearances." Caroline looked up at him, and the question she should have asked hours ago finally left her lips. "Are you?" Klaus's expression hardened slightly, the vulnerability sliding away as he stood, putting distance between them. "Is that what you think? That I came back to Mystic Falls to kill random townspeople?" His voice carried an edge of hurt beneath the words. Caroline stood as well, facing him. "I don't know what to think, Klaus. People are dying, you're here acting suspicious, and you have a history of violence. What am I supposed to believe?" Klaus turned away, moving to the window, his posture tense. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, carefully moderated. "I'm not killing anyone, Caroline. I'm here because I'm hunting something dangerous that followed me from New Orleans, something that's targeting this town specifically." Caroline's breath caught. "What do you mean, hunting something?" Klaus looked back at her, and his expression was grim. "There's an ancient vampire older than me by centuries, who I crossed in New Orleans. I took something that belonged to him, something valuable, and he's been tracking me ever since, leaving destruction in his wake. When I realised he was heading toward Mystic Falls, I came here to stop him before he could hurt anyone. He trailed off, and Caroline finished the sentence in her head. Anyone I care about. The implications rearranged everything Caroline thought she understood about the situation. So you're not causing the disappearances, you're trying to stop them. Klaus nodded. I've been tracking him, trying to find where he's hiding. But he's clever, covers his tracks well. I haven't been able to get ahead of him yet. Caroline felt panic rise in her chest, sharp and urgent. Klaus, my friends. They think you're working with this thing, or that you're behind it. They're investigating, trying to find evidence against you. If they encounter this vampire thinking he's an ally, Klaus's expression shifted into something dangerous. Protective. They'll walk right into a trap. How much do they know? Where are they? Caroline pulled out her phone, texting the group frantically, trying to reach them, warn them. But the responses that came back made her blood run cold. Stefan had texted 10 minutes ago that they'd found someone who claimed to have information about Klaus's activities, someone willing to meet them at the old warehouse district. Bonnie added that the informant seemed credible, knew details about the attacks. Elena's last message, sent 5 minutes ago, said they were heading to the meet now. Oh God, Caroline breathed. They're meeting him. They think he's going to help them stop you. Klaus was already moving, grabbing his jacket, his entire demeanour shifting from vulnerable artist to predatory warrior in the space of a heartbeat. Where's the warehouse? Caroline followed him, her vampire speed matching his as they headed for the door. East side of town, the abandoned industrial complex. They ran, moving with inhuman speed through the woods that bordered the Lockwood estate, Klaus's focus entirely on reaching Caroline's friends before the ancient vampire could spring whatever trap he'd laid. As they ran, Klaus spoke, his voice tight. His name is Lucian, and he's been around since the Roman Empire. He's strong, fast, and completely without conscience. He doesn't kill for food or revenge or territory. He kills because he enjoys it, because causing pain is entertainment. Caroline's fear ratcheted higher. Why did he follow you here? What did you take from him? Klaus's expression was dark. A dagger that could kill an original, one of several he'd been collecting. I couldn't let him have it, couldn't risk him using it against my family. So I stole it, and I've been running from him ever since. It was so typical. Caroline thought with a mixture of exasperation and understanding, Klaus doing something dangerous and morally grey for family, for protection, and causing collateral damage in the process. But right now, the why didn't matter. All that mattered was reaching the warehouse before her friends made a mistake that could get them killed. Meanwhile, at the warehouse, Stefan, Damon, Elena, Bonnie, Tyler, and Matt stood facing a man who looked to be in his early 30s, handsome and refined, with an accent that spoke of old Europe and ancient bloodlines. He'd introduced himself as Marcus, claimed to be a vampire who'd had dealings with Klaus. Said he had information about what the hybrid was doing in Mystic Falls. Damon was sceptical, his arms crossed, his posture defensive. And why exactly would you help us against Klaus? What's in it for you? Marcus smiled, and there was something cold in the expression. Something that made Stefan's instincts prickle with warning. Let's just say Klaus and I have history, and I'd very much like to see him suffer. If that means helping you lot protect your town, then we have common cause. Bonnie stepped forward, her witch senses extending, trying to read the magical aura around this vampire. What she felt made her stomach drop. An ancient dark energy that felt wrong, predatory in a way that went beyond normal vampirism. Wait, she started, but before she could finish, Marcus moved. He was fast, impossibly fast, crossing the distance between himself and Elena in a blur, his hand wrapping around her throat and lifting her off the ground. Damon and Stefan lunged forward, but Marcus's other hand shot out, and suddenly they were thrown backward by an invisible force, slamming into the warehouse wall hard enough to leave cracks in the concrete. Tyler shifted, bones breaking and reforming as he triggered his werewolf transformation. But Marcus just laughed. Oh, how delightful Klaus's failed experiment. Did he tell you what he did to your bloodline? How he used you all and then discarded you when you were no longer useful? Matt pulled out a gun loaded with wooden bullets, but Bonnie grabbed his arm, shaking her head. Guns wouldn't stop this thing, whatever it was. Marcus smiled at Elena, who was struggling in his grip, her face turning red from lack of air. You must be the famous doppelganger, the one everyone's so obsessed with protecting. How ordinary you seem in person. He turned his attention to the rest of them, still holding Elena like she weighed nothing. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to deliver a message to Klaus for me. Tell him that if he wants his little blonde plaything to survive, he'll give me back what he took. He has until midnight tonight. Or I start killing everyone she loves, starting with this one. He shook Elena for emphasis, and she gasped, clawing at his arm. Stefan struggled to his feet, his face a mask of fury and fear. Let her go. And we'll talk. We'll find a way to get you what you want. Marcus tilted his head, considering. No, I don't think so. I think I'll keep her, just to make sure Klaus understands I'm serious. The rest of you can run along and deliver my message. Bonnie's hands came up, power gathering around her as she began to chant. But Marcus was faster. He dropped Elena and moved, appearing in front of Bonnie in an instant, his hand closing around her throat. Ah, the little witch. I can feel your power, quite impressive for someone so young. But you're out of your depth, child. He squeezed, and Bonnie's chanting cut off with a choked gasp. That's when Caroline and Klaus burst through the warehouse door. Caroline took in the scene in an instant. Elena on the ground, gasping for air. Bonnie in the grip of this ancient creature. Her friends scattered and hurt, and felt rage override fear. She launched herself at Marcus, vampire speed propelling her forward, but he simply backhanded her away like she was an annoying insect. Caroline hit a support beam and fell hard, pain radiating through her body. Klaus's voice, when he spoke, was cold as death. Lucien, I should have known you'd go after the people I care about. It's your favourite strategy, isn't it? Hurting others because you lack the courage to face me directly. Lucien released Bonnie, who crumpled to the ground coughing, and turned to face Klaus with a smile that was all teeth. Klaus, how good of you to join us. I was just getting acquainted with your friends, explaining our arrangement. Klaus moved further into the warehouse, his entire bearing radiating lethal intent. There is no arrangement. You want the dagger? Come and take it from me. Leave them out of this. The warehouse felt too small suddenly, the air thick with tension and the promise of violence. Klaus stood between Lucien and Caroline's friends, his posture deceptively relaxed, but Caroline could see the coiled readiness in every line of his body, a predator preparing to strike. Lucien circled slowly, his smile never wavering, and Caroline felt sick watching him move with that ancient, terrible confidence. You know I can't just let this go, Klaus, Lucien said, his voice carrying easily through the cavernous space. You stole from me, embarrassed me in front of my people. That requires a response, a lesson that teaches others not to cross me. Klaus's expression was cold, contemptuous. You were going to use that dagger to kill my sister. Possibly my entire family. Forgive me if I don't feel particularly guilty about preventing genocide." Lucien laughed, the sound echoing off the metal walls. "Always so noble when it comes to family, yet you leave such destruction in your wake everywhere else. Tell me, have your new friends here learnt about the real reason you're in Mystic Falls? About why you really came back?" Caroline, still on the ground where she'd fallen, felt her stomach twist. Klaus's jaw clenched, but he didn't take the bait. "This is between you and me, Lucien. Let them go, and we'll settle this properly." Lucien's gaze slid to Caroline, and the weight of his attention made her skin crawl. But that wouldn't be nearly as entertaining. Besides, I think we should be honest with dear Caroline here, don't you? She deserves to know the whole truth about your feelings. Klaus's expression flickered, something like panic crossing his features before he locked it down. "Lucien, I'm warning you." Lucien ignored him, addressing Caroline directly. "Did you know that Klaus came back to Mystic Falls specifically because I was coming here? That he tracked me across 3 states, following the trail of bodies I left, all to protect this unremarkable little town? Do you know why?" Caroline pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ribs, her gaze locked on Klaus. "He told me he was hunting you, that you followed him." Lucien's laugh was cruel. "Oh, that's partly true. But what he didn't tell you is that I was coming here specifically because I discovered his weakness, his one vulnerability. I learned about you, Caroline Forbes, about the pathetic devotion Klaus has for you. I came here to destroy what he loves most, to make him suffer the way he made me suffer. And Klaus, noble fool that he is, came rushing to your rescue like some lovesick knight." The revelation hit Caroline like a physical blow, recontextualizing everything Klaus had told her earlier. He hadn't just been hunting a threat to Mystic Falls, he'd been protecting her specifically, had put himself in danger because this ancient monster had learned about his feelings and weaponized them. Klaus's voice was tight, with barely controlled rage. "Are you quite finished?" Lucien shrugged elegantly. "Almost. I just want Caroline to understand that every person I've killed in this town, every disappearance, every body drained and left in the woods, that's all because of Klaus's feelings for her. All those deaths are on his conscience, on his love for someone who doesn't even want him." The words were designed to hurt, to create division, and Caroline felt them land with devastating accuracy. She looked at Klaus, saw the guilt and pain in his expression, saw him struggling with the weight of Lucien's accusation. Stefan had managed to stand, helping Elena to her feet, and his voice cut through the tension. "This isn't Klaus's fault. You made the choice to kill those people. You're responsible for those deaths." Lucien's attention shifted to Stefan, dismissive. How tedious the righteous Salvatore defending the hybrid. "Do you even know what he's cost you? The pain he's caused your family?" Before Stefan could respond, Damon, who had been slowly working his way closer while Lucien was distracted, made his move. He lunged with vampire speed, a wooden stake in his hand aimed at Lucien's heart. But Lucien moved faster, catching Damon's wrist and twisting, the sound of bones breaking audible even across the warehouse. Damon's pained grunt turned into a shout as Lucien threw him across the room like a ragdoll. Klaus used the distraction to attack, moving with the enhanced speed and strength of an original, his hand closing around Lucien's throat. For a moment, they grappled, two ancient vampires locked in a struggle that shook the very foundation of the building. But Lucien was older, had centuries more experience, and he eventually broke Klaus's grip, retaliating with a vicious strike that sent Klaus stumbling backward. Bonnie had recovered enough to start chanting, her magic flaring to life, trying to bind Lucien in place. He felt the spell taking hold and snarled, his attention snapping to her. "Foolish witch," he hissed, and even as Bonnie's magic wrapped around him, he fought against it, slowly pushing through the mystical bonds like they were cobwebs. Caroline realised they were losing, that Lucien was too strong, too old, too skilled for them to defeat through conventional means. She looked at Klaus, saw the determination in his face even as blood trickled from his mouth, and made a decision. She ran, not away, but toward Klaus, reaching him and grabbing his arm. "The dagger," she said urgently. "Where is it? Can we use it against him?" Klaus's eyes widened. "Caroline, no. That dagger is meant for originals. It won't kill him, it might not even slow him down significantly." Caroline shook her head. "But it's what he wants, right? It's leverage. Give it to me." Klaus hesitated, the internal struggle clear on his face, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek silver dagger, ancient runes etched along the blade. He pressed it into Caroline's hand. "If this goes wrong," he started, but Caroline cut him off. "It won't. Trust me." She turned and ran toward Lucien, who was still fighting against Bonnie's magical bindings, and held up the dagger. "Lucien, is this what you want?" Lucien's attention snapped to her, his eyes narrowing when he saw what she held. "Give me the dagger, and we can end this." Caroline's hand tightened on the weapon. "Let my friends go first. All of them walk out of here safely. Then we'll talk about the dagger." Lucien's smile was calculating. "You think you can negotiate with me, little vampire? You're barely a century old. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Caroline lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of confidence and strength she'd cultivated over years of surviving supernatural threats. "Maybe not, but I know Klaus cares about me, which means this dagger is the only leverage I have. So here's what's going to happen. My friends leave. Now. And then you and Klaus can settle your business like the ancient petty men you are." For a long moment, the warehouse was silent, except for the sound of Bonnie's laboured breathing as she maintained her spell. Then Lucien laughed, genuine amusement colouring the sound. "You have spirit, I'll give you that. Fine. Your friends can go. But you stay, you and Klaus and that dagger, and we'll have a proper conversation about payment for his theft." Stefan immediately protested. "We're not leaving Caroline here." Caroline didn't take her eyes off Lucien. "Yes, you are. Get everyone out, get them safe. Klaus and I can handle this." Klaus moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "She's right. This is between Lucien and me. Take Elena, Bonnie, Damon, and the others. Go." There was a long moment of resistance, of Stefan and Damon clearly wanting to argue. But Elena, clutching her bruised throat, nodded. "Come on, we need to regroup. Caroline knows what she's doing." Slowly, reluctantly, the group retreated. Tyler helping Damon, whose wrist was still healing. Stefan supporting Bonnie, who looked drained from maintaining her spell. As they left, Bonnie released her magical hold on Lucien, who stretched like a cat, his smile dangerous. Just the three of us now. How intimate. Caroline felt Klaus shift beside her, positioning himself slightly in front of her, protective even now. "Here's what's actually going to happen, Lucien," Klaus said, his voice deadly calm. "You're going to leave Mystic Falls, you're going to stop hunting me, and you're going to forget Caroline Forbes exists. In exchange, I'll give you back your dagger." Lucien's expression turned mocking. "And why would I agree to that when I could simply kill you both and take the dagger anyway?" Klaus's smile was cold. "Because I didn't bring the only dagger. I brought several, and I've hidden them across 3 continents in places you'll never find. Kill me, and you'll never recover them. But let us go. Agree to leave this town, and everyone in it alone, and I'll tell you where they are." It was a bluff, Caroline realised. Klaus was gambling that Lucien's greed and desire to recover all the daggers would outweigh his desire for revenge. Lucien studied them both, his ancient mind clearly weighing options, calculating odds. Finally, he spoke. "You're lying. There's only one dagger, the one in her hand." Klaus shrugged. "Are you willing to bet on that? Are you willing to risk losing weapons that could kill anyone you choose, just for the satisfaction of killing me now?" The standoff stretched, tense and dangerous, and Caroline felt sweat trickle down her spine despite the cool air. Then Lucien moved, so fast she barely registered it, and suddenly he was in front of her, his hand wrapping around hers, around the dagger. "I'll take my chances," he said, and began to squeeze, trying to break her grip. Pain shot through Caroline's hand, bones grinding together, but she held on, refusing to let go. Klaus roared, grabbing Lucien and pulling him away from Caroline with enough force to tear through the ancient vampire's shirt. They fought, vicious and brutal, trading blows that would have killed a normal person instantly. Caroline clutched the dagger to her chest, watching helplessly as Klaus battled something stronger than him, faster than him, more experienced. She saw Klaus taking damage, saw blood and torn flesh, and knew he was losing. Without thinking, driven by instinct and fear and the memory of all those letters he'd written, all those paintings he'd created, all that silent devotion, Caroline ran forward and plunged the dagger into Lucien's back. The ancient vampire screamed, a sound of rage and pain that shook the warehouse walls. He spun, backhanding Caroline away, and she flew across the room, hitting the ground hard enough to crack concrete. Through blurring vision, she saw Klaus take advantage of Lucien's distraction, saw him grab the dagger still protruding from Lucien's back and twist, driving it deeper. Lucien collapsed, not dead, but severely weakened, the dagger apparently having some effect even if it wasn't designed for him. Klaus pulled the dagger free, then grabbed Lucien by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "You came to my town, threatened people I care about, killed innocents. That requires a response, as you said, a lesson." Klaus's voice was cold, final, and Caroline knew what was coming. She closed her eyes as Klaus delivered the killing blow, as Lucien's screams cut off abruptly, as the ancient vampire who'd terrorized Mystic Falls met his end. When she opened her eyes again, Klaus was standing over Lucien's desiccating corpse, breathing hard, covered in blood. He looked at Caroline, and the vulnerability was back. The mask of the monster dropped to reveal the man underneath. "Are you all right?" he asked, crossing to her quickly, helping her sit up. Caroline nodded, wincing at the pain in her ribs and hand. "I'll heal. Are you okay?" Klaus's laugh was shaky. "I've survived worse, but that was closer than I'd like to admit." They sat there on the floor of the warehouse, surrounded by destruction, and Caroline found herself studying Klaus's face, seeing him with new eyes. He'd come back to Mystic Falls to protect her, had put himself in danger, had been willing to die rather than let Lucien hurt her or her friends. And all those letters, all those paintings, all that silent love, it had been real, devastatingly, completely real. "You came here for me," she said quietly, and it wasn't a question. Klaus met her gaze, and his expression was open, honest. "I would have crossed the world for you, Caroline. I would have faced anything, risked everything, if it meant keeping you safe. That's what you do when you love someone the way I love you." The confession, spoken aloud without deflection or charm or protective layers, landed in Caroline's chest and settled there, changing something fundamental in how she saw Klaus, how she saw herself, how she saw the complicated dance they'd been doing around each other for years. The warehouse was quiet now, except for the sound of their breathing. The ancient vampire's body already turning to ash in, the way very old vampires did when they finally met their end. Caroline sat beside Klaus on the cold concrete floor, processing everything that had happened, everything she'd learned, everything she felt. Klaus had pulled out his phone, texting his siblings to let them know the threat was eliminated, that Lucien wouldn't be a problem anymore. His hands shook slightly as he typed, the adrenaline of battle wearing off to leave exhaustion and pain. Caroline watched him, this 1,000-year-old creature who'd survived countless battles and threats, who'd been betrayed and hurt and forced to be hard for so long, and saw the cracks in his armour, the places where vulnerability leaked through. When he finished texting, Klaus pocketed his phone and turned to look at her. "Your friends will be worried. I should get you back to them so they know you're safe." He moved to stand, but Caroline reached out and caught his arm. "Wait, we need to talk about everything. About what I found at your place. About what you said." Klaus's expression became guarded, the vulnerability sliding away as he prepared for rejection. "Caroline, you don't have to say anything. I didn't tell you about the letters and paintings to obligate you or make you uncomfortable. I just thought you deserved to know the truth." Caroline shook her head. "That's not what I mean. I need you to understand something." She took a breath, gathering her thoughts, trying to articulate the complicated tangle of emotions in her chest. "When I came to see you today, I was doing it for my friends. Because they asked me to spy on you, to get information. I didn't want to... I was angry about being put in that position. But then I spent the day with you, and I saw sides of you I'd been trying to ignore, the artist, the man who pays attention to small details, the person who loves silently and asks nothing in return. And when I found that chest, when I read those letters, Klaus, it broke my heart." Klaus's jaw clenched. "I never meant to hurt you." Caroline continued, needing to get it all out. "You broke my heart because I realised how much time we've wasted, how many moments we could have had if you'd just told me, if you'd given me those gifts, if you'd let me see this side of you instead of hiding it away. And then tonight, seeing you fight that thing, knowing you came here to protect me specifically, it made me realise something I've been trying not to admit for a long time." Klaus's expression shifted, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "What did you realise?" Caroline's voice was soft, honest. "That I care about you, Klaus. More than I want to. More than is probably smart or safe. But I do. When I saw you getting hurt, when I thought Lucien might kill you, I felt something break inside me. And I can't keep pretending those feelings don't exist, just because you're complicated and dangerous and have done terrible things." The words hung between them, a confession and an admission, and a door opening to possibility. Klaus stared at her, and for a moment he looked utterly lost, like he didn't know how to process what she was saying. "Caroline," he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "You don't have to say this because I saved you, or because you feel grateful, or because you saw the letters. I don't want you to feel obligated." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes, frustrated and moved by his inability to just accept that someone could care about him without ulterior motive. "I'm not saying it because of any of that. I'm saying it because it's true, because I'm tired of fighting what I feel, because life's too short and we've already wasted so much time." She reached up and cupped his face, feeling him freeze under her touch. "I'm saying it because when I thought you might die tonight, I realised I would regret never telling you." Klaus's hand came up to cover hers, his eyes intense and vulnerable, and full of something that looked like wonder. "I've loved you for so long," he said quietly, "so long that I'd convinced myself it was enough just to love you from a distance, to paint you and write to you and watch you live your life. I never thought, never imagined that you might actually." He trailed off, and Caroline saw tears in his eyes, this ancient, powerful creature brought to tears by the possibility of being loved in return. "I'm scared," Caroline admitted, because honesty seemed important right now. "I'm scared of what loving you means, of the complications and the danger and the moral complexity. I'm scared of what my friends will think, of how this changes everything. But I'm more scared of walking away and wondering what if." Klaus's other hand came up to frame her face, his touch gentle, reverent. "I won't hurt you, Caroline. I swear on every life I've lived, on every moment of eternity ahead of us, I will spend forever trying to be worthy of you." It was a big promise, probably impossible to keep, but the sincerity in his voice made Caroline believe he meant it, that he would try, and maybe that was enough. Maybe love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing someone despite and because of all their complications. Klaus leaned forward slowly, giving Caroline every chance to pull away, to change her mind. But she didn't want to pull away. She closed the distance between them and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he responded with a reverence that made her chest ache. The kiss was everything. Apology and promise and discovery and relief. Years of tension and denial finally releasing into this one perfect moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Klaus rested his forehead against hers. "I should get you home," he said, but made no move to let her go. Caroline smiled. "Probably my friends are definitely freaking out." They eventually stood, Klaus helping Caroline, despite her protests that she was fine, and walked out of the warehouse into the cool night air. The parking lot where Caroline had left her car hours ago felt like a different world. Peaceful and quiet, compared to the violence they'd left inside. Klaus opened the passenger door of Caroline's car, and she looked at him in confusion. "I'll drive you back. Make sure you get there safely." Caroline wanted to argue, but found she liked the idea of a few more minutes with him before facing her friends, and all the questions and judgment that would inevitably come. They drove through the dark streets of Mystic Falls in comfortable silence, Klaus's hand finding hers on the centre console, and their fingers intertwining like they'd been doing it for years. When they pulled up to the Salvatore boarding house where Caroline could see lights on and shadows moving behind curtains, she felt reluctance settle in her stomach. Klaus parked but didn't turn off the engine, clearly intending to leave as soon as she was safely inside. "Come in with me," Caroline said impulsively. "Face them with me." Klaus looked at the house, then back at her, and she saw doubt in his expression. "I don't think your friends want to see me right now, love. I'm not exactly their favourite person." Caroline squeezed his hand. "I don't care if we're doing this, if we're acknowledging this thing between us, then I'm not hiding it. Come inside." After a long moment, Klaus nodded and turned off the engine. They walked to the door together, and Caroline didn't let go of his hand, a silent statement that she knew her friends would notice immediately. She pushed open the door without knocking. They'd long ago stopped with formalities, and found everyone gathered in the living room, clearly in the middle of an intense discussion that cut off the moment they saw her. Elena was the first to move, crossing the room quickly and pulling Caroline into a hug. "Oh my God, we were so worried. Are you okay? What happened?" Stefan and Damon were on their feet as well, and Caroline saw the moment they registered Klaus standing in the doorway, still holding her hand, saw their expressions shift from relief to confusion to wariness. "Lucian is dead," Caroline said, addressing the room. "Klaus killed him. It's over." The news was met with silence as everyone processed. Then Damon spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "And Klaus is here in our house because?" Caroline took a breath, preparing for the fallout. "Because I asked him to be. Because there are things you all need to understand about why he came back, about what's been happening." Over the next hour, sitting in the Salvatore living room with Klaus beside her and her friends arrayed around them in various states of skepticism and concern, Caroline explained everything. She told them about Lucian tracking Klaus because of his feelings for her, about the real reason Klaus had been in town, about the fight at the warehouse. She left out the details about the letters and paintings. Those felt too private to share, but she was honest about her feelings, about the fact that she cared about Klaus, that they were going to try to see where this connection led. The reactions were mixed. Elena was supportive if concerned, wanting Caroline to be happy, but worried about the complications. Stefan was cautious. He understood complicated love, understood caring for someone despite their darkness, but he also knew Klaus's capacity for violence and wanted assurances that Caroline wouldn't get hurt. Damon was openly sceptical, making sarcastic comments about Klaus's trustworthiness and asking pointed questions about whether Caroline had forgotten all the terrible things Klaus had done. Tyler was the hardest, his jaw tight, his eyes full of hurt and betrayal, because Klaus represented so much pain in his life. Bonnie stayed quiet, her expression thoughtful, and when she finally spoke, her words surprised everyone. "I did a reading earlier, when we got back and Caroline wasn't answering her phone. The card said something about a choice, about darkness and light finding balance. I didn't understand it then, but I think I do now." She looked at Klaus, her gaze steady and serious. "I don't trust you. I think you've done terrible things and hurt people I love, but I also know Caroline, and I know she doesn't make decisions like this lightly. So I'm going to trust her judgment. But know that if you hurt her, there isn't a spell dark enough to describe what I'll do to you." Klaus met her gaze with equal seriousness. I would expect nothing less, and I would deserve every bit of it if I failed her. The conversation wound down eventually, exhaustion and emotional overload leaving everyone drained. Klaus stood to leave, and Caroline walked him to the door, aware of her friends watching, but not caring. On the porch, Klaus turned to face her, his expression soft in the moonlight. "Are you sure about this, Caroline? About us? Because once we start down this path, it will be complicated, there will be judgment and difficulty, and I don't want you to regret choosing me." Caroline stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sure. "I'm choosing you with open eyes, Klaus. I know who you are, the good and the bad and everything in between, and I'm choosing you anyway." Klaus pulled her close, holding her like she was precious and fragile and essential. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised. "We'll figure out what comes next, how to navigate this." Caroline nodded against his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling safe in a way that should have scared her, but somehow didn't. "I'll be waiting." She watched him drive away, standing on the porch until his taillights disappeared, then turned to go back inside. Her friends were still in the living room, and Caroline sat down, prepared for more questions. But Elena just patted the couch beside her, and when Caroline sat, Elena took her hand. "Tell me how you're feeling. Really feeling." Caroline thought about it, about the day she'd had, about the revelations and the fear and the fight and the kiss, and all the complicated emotions swirling in her chest. "Terrified," she admitted. "Hopeful. Confused. Happy? I don't know, I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something huge, something that could be amazing or disastrous, and I'm choosing to jump anyway." Stefan's expression was understanding. Love is always a leap of faith, Caroline. Even when it seems safer, even when it seems simpler, there's always risk. Damon snorted. Especially when it's with Klaus Mikkelsen. You couldn't fall for someone nice and boring? Maybe a human accountant? Despite everything, Caroline laughed. Where would be the fun in that? Bonnie stood, moving to sit on Caroline's other side. "We'll support you, Care. We might not all understand it, and we'll definitely worry. But we trust you. And if this is what you want, if Klaus makes you happy, then we'll figure out how to deal with it." The acceptance, qualified and cautious as it was, meant everything. Caroline felt tears slide down her cheeks, relief and gratitude overwhelming her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know this isn't what any of you wanted. I know it's complicated." Elena hugged her. When has anything in our lives not been complicated? This is just another chapter in the ongoing saga of supernatural drama and questionable romantic choices. Tyler, who had been silent and tense throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "I'm not okay with this, Caroline. I can't be. Not yet. Klaus cost me too much. His honesty hurt, but Caroline appreciated it. I understand, Tyler. I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm just asking you to try to understand." Tyler nodded stiffly and left, and Caroline felt the loss of his approval like a physical ache. But she also knew she couldn't make everyone happy, couldn't choose her path based on everyone else's pain and history with Klaus. She had to choose for herself. Over the next few weeks, Caroline and Klaus navigated the complicated waters of beginning a relationship under intense scrutiny. He returned to New Orleans, but called her every night. Long conversations about art and philosophy and the small details of daily existence. He sent her gifts, not extravagant things, but thoughtful ones. A book he thought she'd enjoy, a sketch of her favourite place in Mystic Falls, a playlist of songs that reminded him of her, and Caroline found herself falling, properly and completely, not for the monster or the myth, but for the man underneath, the one who painted beauty and wrote love letters, and tried so hard to be better than his worst instincts. He came to visit when he could, and they spent stolen days together, walking through the woods, having dinner at the grill where people stared but Caroline didn't care, lying in the grass looking at stars while Klaus told her stories about centuries past. It wasn't easy. There were still complications and disagreements and moments when Klaus's darkness rose up and Caroline had to decide whether to fight through it or walk away. But she stayed, choosing him again and again, and slowly, grudgingly, her friends came to accept it. Stefan, who understood complicated love better than anyone, became an unlikely ally, running interference when Damon got too judgmental, reminding everyone that people could change. Elena supported Caroline's choices even when she didn't fully understand them, offering friendship without conditions. Bonnie remained cautious but fair, judging Klaus by his actions in the present rather than his history. Tyler kept his distance, and Caroline respected that, knowing that some wounds needed more time to heal. Months later, Caroline stood in Klaus's art studio in New Orleans, the one he'd finally invited her to see, and found herself surrounded by paintings of her, dozens of them, years of devotion and artistic obsession made tangible. Klaus watched her reaction nervously, this powerful original vampire rendered vulnerable by his need for her approval. "It's too much, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "Too obsessive? Too intense?" Caroline turned to look at him, this man who loved her with a devotion that spanned years, who had changed his life and his patterns and his choices because she'd asked him to try to be better. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "It's us." She crossed to him and kissed him. Soft and deep, a promise and a commitment and a choice made with open eyes and full heart. When they pulled apart, Klaus smiled, That genuine, unguarded smile he only gave her, and Caroline knew that whatever complications lay ahead, whatever challenges they'd face, this was right. She'd chosen love over fear, chosen possibility over safety. And standing in a room full of paintings that showed her as light and beauty through Klaus's eyes, Caroline felt more seen, more valued, more herself than she ever had before. If you finished this story, tell me in the comments whether you think Caroline and Klaus should have been together sooner, or if the timing worked out exactly as it needed to. And subscribe if you want more Vampire Diaries stories, exploring the complicated relationships that made us fall in love with this show.